This is Daniel Trussell, freethinkingonchess.com. For those who don't know me, I've been playing chess as a hobby for about 20 years. In 2013, I began playing USCF tournaments, and I'm currently an 1813 rated USCF player. I began playing on chess.com just a couple of years ago, and have very much enjoyed the community there. On May 30th, I got the following email. The Fair Play Detection System had determined that I had committed a fair play violation. I immediately lost access to my account, and all of my games that were in progress, which were tournament games, were immediately forfeited. I appealed, and the appeal was denied. Because of being determined to be a cheater and my appeal being denied, I am now permanently banned on chess.com, unless I admit to cheating and apply for a second chance account, which I will not do because I didn't cheat. I've always been aware of the fair play rules on chess.com and have never used a computer engine, used an endgame table base, or sought outside assistance for any of my games. Nor have I done anything else that is against chess.com's fair play rules. I'm making this video, first of all, to publicly defend myself. Secondly, to bring attention to shortcomings of the appeal process that I felt were very much unfair for innocent players like me trying to defend themselves. Thirdly, I'd like to explain why I think the fair play detection system might have thought that I was cheating. And at the end of the video, I'm going to analyze the last game that I played on chess.com to talk through my thought process. In the future, I plan to go through more games in future videos on this channel. First of all, I want to talk about the appeal process. As someone who is innocent, the appeal process left me completely in the dark. First of all, no information was provided at any step of the way why they concluded I had committed a fair play violation. Not even did they mention which games they thought were suspicious. How am I supposed to prepare an appeal when I didn't even know what games triggered my fair play violation? Secondly, almost no information was provided about what the fair play team would need to see in an appeal. I'm showing you the second email that I got from chess.com. This is just part of the email. This explains the appeal process and what the fair play team who looks at the appeal would want to see. And really the only suggestion they give was to provide a USCF or FIDE ID. Thirdly, the fair play team did not view the main piece of evidence that I submitted as a part of my appeal. In my appeal, I submitted two things. One was a short written appeal, and second, which was even the main piece of evidence, was a video where I analyzed 3 of my games that I thought chess.com might have thought were suspicious. And I'm going to bring up that video in the corner. Before I sent the video to chess.com for review, I checked and saw that the video had 1 view according to the YouTube stats. I had uploaded it to YouTube, and I had viewed it once before I sent it off. When I received the email that my appeal was denied, I checked the YouTube stats and saw that the video still had 1 view. Chess.com never viewed my video, which was my main piece of evidence, before denying my appeal. Daniel Rensch, the CCO of Chess.com, recently made a post on social media about a recent cheating scandal and said the following: "However, as we do with any and all cases, public or otherwise, we listen to appeals. We hear people out. We understand that not everything is black and white." Did chess.com really hear me out? Okay, I next want to talk about why the fair play detection system might have thought that I had cheated. So first of all, chess.com, according to my understanding, uses a fair play or cheat detection system that analyzes players' games and calculates, based on the accuracy of the moves, the likelihood that the player used computer assistance. So basically, in my case, the fair play detection system had determined that for some of my games, my moves on the whole were too strong or accurate for me to have played them without computer assistance. So when my account got closed, I had to first of all figure out which games might have been suspicious. And in my case, even though they didn't tell me which games, it was pretty clear that it was my daily games. First of all, the last 5 games that I played on chess.com were daily games. And I hadn't played any other type of game for about 2 weeks at that point. Also, my daily games were the only games that had a high enough accuracy that would have aroused any suspicion. And so the second question I had to figure out was, why did the cheat detection system think that those games used computer assistance? And why did it underestimate my ability to come up with those moves? And so there's 3 reasons why I think the fair play detection system underestimated my ability. So first of all, I'm the type of player who takes daily games very seriously. So for the average daily game player on chess.com, and daily games, for those who don't know, on chess.com are chess.com's version of correspondence chess. For a lot of daily game players, they play daily games not much differently from rapid games, for example. A lot of people will play dozens of games at a time and will make moves, with just a few minutes of thinking, and don't take them as seriously as someone like me, who's on the opposite side of the spectrum. Someone like me, if there's a 3-day time limit, I'm the type of person that will sometimes spend 3 days, and will sometimes spend 3 or 4 hours over 3 days working out and trying to work out the best move in a certain situation. And for someone like me, it should be definitely expected that my accuracy in a daily game, when I'm spending hours on moves, also when I'm using the Opening Explorer and using the analysis board to help, those are 2 additional resources allowed for daily games. It should be expected that my accuracy score would be significantly higher for daily games rather than rapid or blitz. So my question is, does the cheat detection system adequately take into account the variance of playing styles in the daily game format? Is the cheat detection system expecting that everyone just sort of plays it more like the first person I mentioned, who plays it much more casually? Secondly, I think the fair play detection system might have underestimated my ability, partly because the daily game format plays to my strengths as a chess player. First of all, in my chess game, the weakest part of my game is the opening. And one perk of the daily game format is that you're allowed to use the Opening Explorer on chess.com or any other opening books. And I definitely take advantage of using that Opening Explorer and use that to help me see what opening moves people have played in the past and how that has resulted, either in wins or losses or draws. And so that definitely helps someone like me out who's overall a weak opening player. Second of all, I'm very much a perfectionist. So the daily game format is the perfect place for perfectionists to spend as much time as they want on each move, trying to figure out slight differences between first and second best moves, and figuring out which move is actually the best, which is particularly important in the daily game format, because people make far fewer mistakes. And finally, I think even probably the most significant thing is my final 5 daily games that I played on chess.com were against significantly lower rated players, and the character of the games made best moves very easy to find. So this is something that every chess player knows, that certain positions are very easy to find moves. Certain other positions, it's very difficult to find moves. And for the games where it's really tactical, there's lots of complications, lots of lines to analyze. It might be very difficult to find best moves. In other games where positions are simpler, maybe your opponent is making lots of silly mistakes, it can often be very easy to find best moves. And my final 5 games were definitely the type of games where it's much easier to find best moves. So, to conclude this section, I wanted to ask chess.com and Daniel Rensch some questions, and hoping to spark a bit of a discussion here. First of all, do you believe that the appeal process is fair for innocent players who have been accused of a fair play violation? So first of all, of course, most players who get accused of a fair play violation probably are cheaters, probably the vast majority. But inevitably there will be innocent players who get caught up in it. And in my situation, I was given no information about which games they thought were suspicious, basically no information about what the fair play team needed to see in an appeal, and also the fair play team did not even view the main part of my evidence. Is that fair? Secondly, why did the fair play team not view my appeal video? Are enough resources committed towards hearing appeals to allow appeals to be fully heard out? Third, do you believe the fair play detection system applies well for the daily game format, where extra time and resources allow for significantly stronger play from those who take daily games seriously? And finally, are you willing to take another look at my case? So what I want to do next is to look at the final game that I played on chess.com. And what I'm going to show you here first is my profile here. And here on my profile, you can see my final 5 games. These top 2 games were forfeited once my account was closed, so those are unfinished games. So these are the last 5 games that I completed on chess.com here. You can see that they're all against significantly lower rated players. I did have quite high accuracy scores, but definitely not situations where I had 0 inaccuracies or anything, except for maybe this game, which was a very short game, and I'll go over that game in a future video. Very short game where my opponent made some clear blunders. But let's take a look at this final game. In this final game, I am playing black, and my rating is 2090. My opponent's rating is 947, so like an 1100 point difference. Okay, my opponent starts with c4, and I play the Dutch defense. This is what I like to play against both d4 and c4. I enjoy attacking games, I enjoy tactical games, and the Dutch defense allows for that a little bit. Okay, so game continues. I'm going to try to breeze through the opening. And by the way, I do, as I mentioned, take advantage of that opening explorer when I'm playing these daily games. I play the move d6 here. And by the way, I'm playing the Leningrad variation. And I'm playing the move queen e8. This is my favorite continuation here in the Dutch defense. I have some arrows here that I guess these arrows were saved. That I had put in there earlier. And in this position, I wanted to mention here that for white, usually white has their bishop on g2. So usually in this situation, white plays their bishop instead of to e2 here, they fianchetto their bishop and put their bishop on g2. This allows white to influence this important long diagonal and also put pressure on this weak b7 pawn, which is often very valuable for white to do in the Dutch defense. I think this setup is probably slightly weaker. But anyway, moving forward, white plays d5, trying to keep my e pawn down on e7 here. And this can be a problem sometimes for black. Sometimes black's pawn on e7 gets stuck there, and then you end up with a hole here on e6. So I played the move e5. This move is not always a good move. This is always a tempting move to play in the Dutch defense because it, first of all, frees up that e pawn and keeps it from getting stuck on e7. And then after what happened next, I can retake with the bishop. Let me get rid of these. And now, at the same time that I got rid of the e7 pawn, I also developed my bishop. This, however, is not always a good move, especially if the bishop is on g2. White can play something like knight to g5, and if the bishop is on g2, he's opening up an attack on b7 while also attacking this dark squared bishop for black. And this can end up being quite problematic because then white has moves like queen b3, also putting more pressure on here while also putting pressure on this diagonal. So this is why, especially when white fianchettos his bishop, why this back here, this move e5 is often not a great move. But in this situation with the bishop here, there's less of a problem with e5, and I think it's actually a good move, if not best move here. So this allows me to get rid of that sometimes backwards e7 pawn and also develop my bishop at the same time. And here, white plays the move knight to d4 there. Still, I think probably a better move here is knight to g5, which would force my bishop to retreat on this diagonal, which is not ideally what I want to do. I'm going to actually close this for 1 second and come back to it. Okay, the reason why I'm doing this is just to get rid of those arrows that were there from when I looked at the game earlier. Okay, here we are back here. Okay, so white had played this move, knight to d4, instead of knight to g5, which I think is slightly better. And if he had played knight to g5, I would have had to retreat the bishop on this diagonal here. With knight to d4, I'm able to retreat the bishop to f7, where I can keep my bishop here on this weak diagonal for black, since there's no pawn on f7. And also two really strong bishops influencing this queen side for white. Okay, here white plays queen to a4. And this is a situation where when I first saw this move, I was thinking, okay, white is trying to trade his queen, trying to find a way to get to a situation where the game will be simpler and it'll be easier for him to draw. And for that reason, I was kind of not wanting to trade queens. But I sort of quickly analyzed that probably trading queens is my best move here for a couple reasons. And I did play queen trade here. First of all, it moves his knight to a4 on the rim there. So now his knight is arguably on a worse square, pretty clearly on a worse square than he was before on c3. Not only that, just in general, I feel like I have a nice advantage here. As I mentioned, I have nice strong bishops. I like the placement of my bishops. After my next new move, I'm fully developed. And I'm actually a half move ahead of white in terms of development, because white isn't yet fully developed. So I felt like the queen trade was good in that I'm ending up with a fairly significant advantage here that, especially against a lower rated player, should end up being a win. White played here b3, and immediately when he played that, I'm looking at this juicy diagonal here. There's two pieces in the way here, but if those pieces are able to get out of the way, I have a nice discovered attack on this rook. So that's my immediate first thought. And so that pops into my head. First move that pops into my head, which I end up playing, is this next move, knight to c5. So knight to c5 here does a couple things. It threatens to hop into this e4 square, a nice output for the knight, where the knights can support each other. It also tempts white to play the not so great move, in my opinion, of knight captures knight, which is white played. Because after he plays this, I can recapture with the pawn, and now white has to move this knight off the diagonal, opening up the possibility of a discovered attack with my knight. And so this is all, and so you can kind of see with already last few moves, playing the queen to a4, definitely not the best move. And then trading knights here, definitely not the best move here either. White is playing some mistakes that are easy to take advantage of. Okay, white next plays the move knight to b5, which again I think is not the best move here. First of all, I do have a discovered attack here, but it's not the right time to play it. If I do play it, he can easily sidestep and be in an okay, reasonable position. Still, I think black is better here, but better is, I felt, to attack this knight, kick it off of b5, and then play this discovered attack there. And so my first thought was to play c6. I very quickly realized that's not a great idea because it opens up d6 for white to play to, where he can trade off his knight. He's attacking this bishop and pawn here. Instead, I play the much better move a6, which of course allows white to play c7, but that is not a good move. And again, white, much lower rated player, falls for it. All I have to do is simply attack this knight, and white has nowhere to go. So I'd calculated in this position, there's no good square. These are all bad squares where I can easily, I can take his knight. So those are all off the table. His only option, which might not even be the best option, actually I think it's probably not the best option. The move he played, which looks like it's a safe square, is very much not a safe square. Another very obvious move, after trading knights, what I've been looking to do for a while, open up this discovered attack. Now all of a sudden I can open up that discovered attack while taking a piece. So white is at least losing a minor piece here. And in fact, the way he plays it, he's losing a rook. Okay. White tries to defend this passed pawn, which might be kind of his last hope. But really, again, very easy decision to make. All I have to do is kick this bishop off. He can't retreat and still protect this pawn because this diagonal is unavailable. He has to retreat on this diagonal where I can then take the pawn. White tries to be a teensy bit tricky, I guess, and tries to attack my dark squared bishop. I could take the light squared bishop here. I don't think it's as good, and I didn't think it was as good at the time. He takes my dark squared bishop, and now while it's winning, it should be still very clearly winning. It's probably not quite as quickly winning. I don't have my very powerful dark squared bishop, and it's going to be just probably a little bit trickier, a little bit longer to win. So instead, I retreat this bishop to a nice square here, and I put it on f6 because it has access to a lot of different squares and a lot of different diagonals. Okay, and so white now retreats his bishop, and I happily snap up his passed d-pawn. White, it looks like he's trying to create a new pass pawn here with the move e4. But now I figured is the time for me to create my own pass pawn. Again, a very clear move. c4 forces a pass pawn for black. So for example, if he would take, I can easily take back. And now after retreats, maybe he retreats here. I can push here. Actually, that's probably not a good idea because then he loses his bishop. But if he retreats here, then I'm winning a pawn here. So this pawn, very strong, can move up the board while attacking pieces and is going to queen, especially with my rook right behind it. And eventually white would have to probably sacrifice a piece for it. Okay, but anyway, that's not what happened. White retreats his bishop, and in this case I could push the pawn. Even better though, I felt, was to take on b3. Take on b3 here, and now when white takes back, I have nice two passed pawns, two distant connected passed pawns with a bishop controlling the queening square for this a pawn. And these pawns are going to roll and queen. Sorry, that's not a move I meant to make. Okay, white didn't do that. Instead, he played this move, bishop to b4, attacking my rook, and threatening to win the exchange. This is no problem to me. I'm not worried about that at all. I felt like much stronger simply to take the a pawn as I did. Now I have this passed a pawn on the 7th rank and ready to queen. If white takes my rook, there's no way that white can stop that pawn from queening. But white takes my rook anyway. I happily take back with my king, keeping my rook on this nice open c file. White plays bishop to d3, still probably hoping to create a passed e pawn there. And I play the move bishop to b2. Now this is the first situation where I felt like this move was actually the first move that wasn't super clear. And actually I was very proud of this move. Partly because it wasn't the clear move. So the very obvious move here is just to queen the A pawn. And if I were playing a live time game, if I was playing Blitz, Rapid, or even probably like a classical tournament game, I probably would just queen the pawn. It's simple. It's winning. There's no reason to really complicate things. Because here we go. I'm up a bishop and a rook. 2 passed pawns. This is super easy. However, in daily games, this is my opportunity to not just play the obvious moves. And this is also part of what I love about chess, is to play the creative moves, to play, to look for not just good moves, not just the obvious moves, but best moves, and to be creative. And that's when I found this move, bishop to b2. And what I'm hoping to do here is move the rook to c1, creating a blockade and queening this pawn without allowing white to sacrifice his rook for it. And there's no way he can stop that from happening. So let's keep going. White plays kind of a ridiculous move, ridiculous looking move, I guess. This move, rook to b1. Again, the obvious move here is just to take the rook. And again, if I was playing a rapid game, I would most definitely just play this probably. However, in this position too, I figured that actually taking the rook and queening the pawn is not my best move. So if you look at this variation, queens the pawn, takes the bishop. Here I am winning a rook and a bishop for that passed pawn. A good thing, right? The only thing is I have even better. Instead of that, I can play it as I was planning, rook to c1, which basically forces white to, and this is what he did in the game, forces white to trade, take back. And now in this position, there is nothing white can do to either take that A pawn or keep it from queening. And now, instead of just winning a bishop and a rook, as I mentioned before, now I'm winning a full queen for that passed pawn, because I'm going to queen that pawn and no one's going to take it. Okay, white goes ahead with trying to create this passed pawn, and I play one final move, one final delaying move before I queen the pawn. And again, I was kind of proud of this move too. Obviously almost any move in this position, any move in this position is still winning for black. But daily games are the type of games where I'm looking for the best move. So I play bishop to e3. So what this does is this takes away the f2 square from white, which keeps him from that important escape square. And at the same time, checks white's king. White plays king to f1. One of two moves, the best of the two. And now I finally queen the pawn. And by the way, at this point, I think it was in this situation here, I had set up a bunch of conditional moves. So one thing on chess.com you can do is set up what's called conditional moves, where you predict what your opponent is going to play, and then if that opponent plays that, you can set up a move that says, if white does this, then play this move. And so you can set up a bunch of moves to automatically play if white plays the moves that I'm expecting. So first conditional move is he would play here, and I would queen. Next conditional move, he would play here, and I would play here. Next conditional move, and this is setting up a mate in two, is white takes the d pawn. The conditional move I set up was this, followed by here, followed by here, and finally having mate. Okay, and that is how this game ended up. White moved to f1. I queened the pawn. White plays basically his only move. He could have technically played there and blocked with his bishop. That's not a very natural move, though. I played queen here, and he did take my bishop, and it set up a mate in 2. So anyway, thank you for listening to the video, and please let me know what you think. I'm really hoping that this sparks some discussion. Please let me know what you think of my situation, and let me know if you're someone who's been caught in this kind of situation too, been accused of cheating, and but has been innocent. Also, let me know if you have any questions about this game. I'd be happy to talk through any additional moves that I didn't really talk through in this game. And definitely subscribe if you want to see future videos that I make. I plan on going through all of these 5 last daily games, and then also some other daily games, some more competitive daily games also that I played earlier. Anyway, thanks again for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.